What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. The history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It's Friday, March 24th, 2017. Thank goodness it's Friday. Thank goodness it's Friday. We have a lot of stuff to talk about today here. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. The Lady Claire will be with us in hour number 3 with her particular perspective on the world here. The crybabies are attacking my web server, so I guess the gang's all here, and let's move forward and actually get something useful done here. Now, we're going to start the top of the show with Obamagate, because the story is developing very rapidly, actually faster than I was expecting it to do. Remember, I'd said it was more than 2 years between the Watergate burglary and Richard Nixon having to resign. And so we would expect this to take a little time. Not as much in the age of the Internet and the independent media, and as a matter of fact, it is going along very, very fast. And a lot of attention now is being focused on the revelations coming out of Freedom Watch, which is the new organization founded by Larry Klayman, the founder of Judicial Watch. And apparently there is a new whistleblower who has come forward. We've mentioned it before, Dennis Montgomery, and he has brought to Freedom Watch 47 hard drives full of information about this spying on everybody. Now, Montgomery is trying to use a legal whistleblower process rather than just out it the way that Edward Snowden did, and that's why he's gone to Larry Klayman for legal representation. But what is coming on out there is this information is showing that the Obama White House was spying on a lot of people, not just Donald Trump, and it went back a very long time. And keep that in mind, because that is an important point to remember as we talk about what else is coming on here. Now, Larry Klayman was on the Fox Business Network, basically saying that the evidence he's seeing indicating this massive, unauthorized, illegal spying, apparently for political gain, is a crime for which Barack Obama and a lot of his associates ought to go to prison for. They've got these 47 hard drives. There's 600 million pages of information. They're still going through it, and what they're finding is just astounding. Representative Peter King is confirming that members of the Trump transition team were surveilled by the Obama administration, and basically saying it was going on long before the FISA warrant was issued. And according to King, this is not an isolated thing. They're finding many reports, many sources, many different players in this. It was a huge operation, even larger than Nixon's committee to re-elect the president. And they're basically out there saying that all of this talk about, they're basically what Obama and the corporate media and the deep state are doing is they're now admitting that yes, there was spying on the Trump campaign and the Trump transition, but it was incidental because we were gathering intelligence regarding this other thing, this supposed link between Trump and Russia. And so now incidental collection has become the new buzzword for the corporate media to make you think that this is not important, that this is not a repeat of the Watergate scandal all over again. But there's a couple of things to keep in mind. First of all, we know that FISA warrant was acquired through fraud, and we know the spying on the Trump people went back long before the FISA warrant was actually ordered. General Tom McInerney, who is a commander, former assistant vice chief of staff for the U.S. Air Force, was interviewed on the Dr. Dave Janda radio show, saying the FISA warrant was just a cover to make it sort of look legitimate if it ever came out that the Obama administration was spying on the Trump campaign. And apparently Attorney General Loretta Lynch already had a huge archive of surveillance data on candidate Donald Trump long before they ever got those FISA warrants. This is a new Watergate. Now, there's a separate issue going on, and it has to do with what's called unmasking. And that is when you expose the names of people in positions of power and authority who don't want that to be public knowledge. Remember the Valerie Plame scandal where, in their haste to discredit her husband's report that the yellow cake claim from Niger was a forgery, the George W. Bush administration inadvertently revealed that Valerie Plame was CIA, and the company she worked for was actually a front for tracking nuclear weapons being traded around the world by countries that have not signed the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, and we know who that is. And it resulted in that company having to be shut down because all of their sources thought they were doing something other than what they were doing. But Bob Woodward is out there saying that this unmasking of Trump officials by leaking this information, making it public, that's a gross violation. And it shows that just like it was with George W. Bush, Barack Obama and his supporters are just being incredibly reckless with what should be protected data. And that's another reason right there that we all need to dig our heels in terms of all this spying and our bugging of our tablets and everything. This government cannot be trusted with your personal private information. They'll use it any way they want to. Remember the bugging of the Seattle Asia-Pacific Economic Conference? Government agents were breaking into the computers of conference attendees to steal business secrets and give them to Bill Clinton cronies. So it is a new Watergate. They were spying on the Trump campaign. That information wound up in the hands of the Hillary campaign. The spying preceded the issuance of a FISA warrant. The FISA warrant was based on fraudulent data. Yeah, we're there. It's a whole new Watergate, and it looks like it was a lot bigger and more sinister. And a lot of Americans, when they look back on Watergate and they see the movies and everything, you know, they come away with the impression that all of this was private on the part of Richard Nixon and his committee to re-elect. No, they were using FBI agents, CIA agents. They were just as dirty back then as they are right now. So this is a big stink. Meanwhile, of course, the corporate media is still out there trying to justify all this. Well, we just have a really strong hunch that Russia and Trump were doing business, and therefore we were justified on spying on them. And even Comey's admitting there is no evidence of it whatsoever. This communication from the servers in Trump Tower to Russia has been exposed as yet another fraud. The Department of Justice found malware on the Trump servers that was mimicking communications with Russia. The other side is saying they found malware there as well. Somebody went to a great deal of effort to break into these computers and install malware that was going to communicate back and forth to create an evidence trail that could be used to say that Donald Trump and the Russia were in cahoots. Now, Jack Matlock is a U.S. ambassador to the Soviet Union, or was from 1987 to 1991, and he's out there basically saying that this whole brouhaha over contacts with Russian diplomats by members of the Trump transition team is a witch hunt and full-on display that we are in a police state, because there is nothing wrong with members of a transition team talking to Russian diplomats about possibly improving relations. It's a normal practice. And he's saying we did it, every other president's done it, only in the case of Donald Trump has the corporate media tried to turn the normal course of diplomatic business into some kind of a crime. All right, we're going to take a short second here to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. The other big story that we're looking at right now is we're waiting on the vote for the health care bill. And apparently Trump has just now asked the House Speaker to yank it. And it's turned into a big fist fight between the people who want Obamacare and the people who want Ryan Care. Trump had originally issued an ultimatum saying you will vote for it today or we're just going to keep Obamacare where it is. And I'm glad he's moving off that, because that was going to backfire. What Trump was trying to say is, if you don't vote through a reformed health care package, then we're back on Obamacare, and it's your fault for not doing your job. Of course, we know Congress and the corporate media would dump the blame on Trump. He was being inflexible. He was being unreasonable. And he's betrayed his campaign promise. Well, in a way, unfortunately, sadly, he already has, because the campaign promise was a repeal of Obamacare, not just a repackage. And basically, even Ryan's closest supporters are saying this thing is just as bad as the old one. It's all about funneling money out of the pockets of the American people into the health insurance corporations. And it was an attempt to snooker us twice in a row. So that's it. It's Obamacare or Obamacare version 2.0. Where is the repeal we were told to expect? Now, do you remember back when they were pushing for TARP and all these bailouts and, taking money away from the American people and giving it to the banks who caused the 2008 mortgage-backed security meltdown? We're seeing the same kind, and back then the warnings were, oh, the economy will collapse, there'll be tanks in the streets. We're seeing the same fear-mongering right now. A story that came out of Kitco, stocks poised to stumble if Trump's health bill flops. Well, first of all, it isn't Trump's health bill, it's Paul Ryan's health bill. So let's get that out of the way right now. See what I said? They're already setting up. They're going to blame Trump for this not working here. Now, interestingly, CNBC, without actually naming this person, claims a member of Congress is predicting a 1,000-point stock market crash if Obamacare Light is not passed. So they're out there using scare tactics to try and ram this thing through. And according to Breitbart, remember those gun grabber provisions of Obamacare? They're still in Paul Ryan's version, where the government can scan all medical records to look for anybody that they think, well, this person ought not to have a gun. Anybody with PTSD or ADHD or even just anxiety, you can have your gun rights suspended if you're suffering from anxiety. And in the current country, under the current political chaos, the current economy, who isn't having to deal with anxiety? So under Ryan Care, your medical records are not private. Anybody can peek into them for any reason they want to. We're going to take a phone call from Scott in Norfolk. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, Mike, I really hope that this Ryan Care doesn't pass, because I think if it does pass, the health insurance industry is going to reward those establishment Republicans that chose to support it, and it's going to be tougher for them to be kicked out the next election. I think Trump's original idea was the right one, but he's got to be shown as trying to save it from imploding, and he's done that. Whether it passes or not, he's done it. He's shown the effort. But I think he needs to get past it. I agree with you. You need to let this blow up on its own. And I'm all for repeal, but I am not for replacing. And
I'm exactly the same with you. We should either go to copying a system that we already know works from another country, or go back to just letting the free market decide what's going to go on, let people make their own choices. But there's been a very alarming trend of which Obamacare is just one facet, where as the economy starts to stumble and lock up, large corporations with political influence are lobbying for the government to force people to buy their products, whether it's health insurance, vaccines, whatever. And the problem is we're running out of money out here in the hinterland. It doesn't matter how many laws they pass, this strategy will not work in the long run. The only thing that can work in the long run is to get the economy back up and running for ordinary people so we can pay for all this stuff that they want to sell us. Just ordering us to buy things, that's all Obamacare was. You know, Obama said, I'm going to guarantee health insurance coverage for every American. Then he stands up and says, you will buy your health insurance. Problem solved. And that's it. Same thing we're seeing with the vaccine industry. People don't want their products, can't afford their products. We'll make it mandatory. And it's a short-term fix that favors individual corporations, but it is not going to change the ultimate outcome of our economic decline. And somebody's going to have to man up and say, this is not a good approach to solving the economic problems. If anything, it's accelerating us down to the path of collapse by forcing ordinary Americans to just, descend into outright poverty and living on their credit cards because of all the things the government is telling them they have to buy now.
With these $5,000 deductibles, you basically don't. You have insurance you can't use.
That's it.
And if I had a $5,000 car insurance policy, I might as well not even have it because my car's not worth it. And that's where they got us. And I was for it in the beginning, Mike, but I was for a single payer. That's what I thought we were getting.
Yeah.
And now it's just a catastrophe. And here's another thing, and this is on a slightly different subject. I'm a recovering liberal, and I'm starting to see a lot of fellow liberals making this claim, especially on climate change, aka global warming, that they're on the side of science. And whenever I get into a discussion with them about this, climate change, I'll say, how scientific is it for you to tell people that they can change their chromosomes just by thinking about it?
That's a good one.
That's not scientific.
No,
that's
it isn't.
And magical thinking.
The reality is the science is not on the side of Al Gore and his warming hysterics. It's all manufactured propaganda, magical thinking, and we believe. And basically, they're not being scientists. They're merely using the label of science to try and prevail in the argument. These days, in the good old days, the kings would turn to the priests and the religions and say, you tell them the gods want them to do what I want them to do. And the priests would say, yes, sir, and they would do that. But obviously religion in our culture is very much on the wane now. And so the rulers have thrown the priests out and brought the scientists in. They give them a white lab coat and a clipboard, and they say, all right, now you tell the people that they are warming the planet so that they will pay the carbon taxes I want to impose. And the scientists will say, yes, sir, and that's exactly what they'll do. Just because somebody is a scientist does not make them necessarily or automatically an honorable person. There's no integrity that comes with that white lab coat. And most scientists are easily controlled by controlling the funding. And there was a huge amount of funding going on out for any scientist who could come up with any kind of a ginned-up report to say, yes, humans are warming the Earth. And a lot of scientists did very well out of the deal, but they weren't being scientific. Their results were not reproducible. They kept hiding the raw data. They kept hiding the methodology, and all of these are violations of classic scientific method. And so they're not being scientific. They're merely using the label and the image of science to try and convince you, because obviously they're scientists and they're liberals, and therefore they are much smarter and better educated than you, so you should just shut up and go along with what the liberals tell you. And again...
When I get into a debate about climate scientists, I tell them, and these are the same people who are claiming that 99% of all climate scientists are behind climate change. Big surprise there. I said, well, all that food that you get at Whole Foods because it's not GMO? Well, there's 99% of all GMO scientists that say GMO is not wrong. That's not bad for you.
Yeah.
So
same thing with the vaccines here. But first of all, that claim that 99% of climate scientists support the global warming, that itself is a lie. And a lot of the people who were listed on that list of people who are on board, they have actually threatened lawsuits unless their names are removed, because they are not, in fact, on board with that. A lot of the people who were claimed to be climate scientists supporting global warming aren't scientists at all. They don't have the advanced degrees. They're not published. They're just people who help shuffle the data around. They were making that thing up out of absolute thin air. And it's just part of this larger realization that, yes, virtually everything we get from corporate media and the government is a lie to control us, to rule us, to plunder our wealth, and to take our children for wars of conquest. There is nothing true coming out of the government or the corporate media. In the case of the corporate media, I think we can still trust the sports scores, but that's about it. Thank you for the call, Scott. We got to let you go and take a break for commercials. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And let me just put this over to one side. Let's talk about the London terror attack, which is what they're calling it. And when it was all going down, they said there's two suspects. Well, now it's just back to the official one, and so it's already beginning to smell like some kind of a setup here. And everybody is exploiting it for their political gain. Now, yesterday we had all of the globalists, the Remainers, saying that this guy was born in Great Britain, and therefore mass immigration was absolutely not a factor. But let's be very honest. They're saying this guy was born in Britain and somehow was exposed to these radicalizing influences. I don't think they found those radicalizing influences in the British schools. So who brought this new point of view, this new philosophy, this new religion into Britain and introduced it to him? So, yeah, the mass immigration is a factor. Not because it produced this individual terrorist, but because it's conducive to that climate of radicalization. Now, showing how absurd some of the attempts to use this incident for political agenda can be, there was a story out of the Microsoft network, MSN.com, where they're saying that Khalid Massoud snapped because of the racism in his village, and then he became radicalized. So the corporate media spin, at least here in the United States of America, is it's all the fault of us white people. We're to blame for the attack on Parliament because we're all racists. I mean, that really is kind of ridiculous, but that's what they're doing. Now then, obviously huge outpouring of sympathy for the victims of what happened over there in Parliament in London. And a lot of people coming on out and saying, isn't it kind of weird that everybody's just crying over what happened in Parliament, and they're absolutely oblivious to what's going on in Yemen, where this Saudi-led, U.S.-backed blockade has put virtually the entire nation on the edge of famine. And nobody cares, because corporate media hasn't told you to care about it. We're the corporate media. We will tell you what to care about. You will care about these people who were hurt at the Parliament, and we don't care about what happened to people at Yemen. You will care about Kim Kardashian and her latest fashion, and you won't care about the fact that, you know, Obama appears to have been spying on the Trump campaign on behalf of Hillary. You don't care about that. You will care about the possibility, however remote, that Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin are secretly lovers. You see how it all works there. Let's take a phone call. Tom in Minnesota. Aloha. Welcome to the I'm sorry, Tom in, Tom in Minnesota. Right. I had it right. Okay. What's on your mind?
Yeah. You're talking about the terror attacks in England. I wonder if that guy was a second generation, because from my experience, at least what I've observed on the internet and the Black Lives Matter, and around here we got a lot of Somalis and Mexicans. It's the second generation that seems to be the more radical than the first, who seems to be pretty, you know, at least outwardly polite. It's the second generation that seems to be kind of in your face.
Well, it may be because that first generation has a very accurate memory of what life was like in the home country, but that second generation, for them, it's an abstraction, which is far easier to manipulate into some romanticized version that will increase the sense of polarization with the current culture they're embedded in.
Right. That would explain, if he's second generation, that would explain his radicalization.
Okay.
Yeah, that's anyways, I guess, something to think about, because I don't know how far away he is from there, but I'll put money on he's second generation.
Yeah, I think it's worth looking into. So yeah, that's a good point. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, thanks.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go here. We're coming up on a commercial break. After we come on back, we're going to be talking about the war zones. Emphasis on the plural, because there's still all kinds of insane stuff going on out there. So we'll be back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're just now getting word that Ryan Care is dead. Apparently Trump and Ryan have pulled the new Obama health care bill. They could not get enough votes together to pass it, and basically it's now officially dead. And Congress may get back to thinking about a new health care sometime later in the year. And the corporate media is already dumping this on Donald Trump. Trump care is dead. It's a huge defeat, massive defeat for Donald Trump. So it's like I said, we've got a government that is so badly factionalized, it's become dysfunctional. They're too busy digging at each other and fighting with each other to actually accomplish anything useful or meaningful for the American people. Forget about building a wall along the border with Mexico. Let's build one around Washington, D.C. and lock them all in. And we'll fling some food over the wall every once in a while, keep them from eating each other. All right, let's take a phone call. Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Mike. You seen any bearded Asian men lately? Because that's all the media was calling that London attacker.
Yeah, it is amazing. And when I pointed out the fact that the original report said he was Asian, and he certainly didn't look like that in the photos, and I got all these emails saying, well, from Britain's point of view, you know, anything on the other side of the channel is Asian. The Middle East is Asian. Really, it doesn't mean that they were trying to, you know, protect the immigration refugee thing going on. But even now they're having to back off and saying, yeah, this guy really doesn't qualify as Asian, especially because he was born in Great Britain.
And he didn't have a gun. MSNBC, there was a gun incident. You know, they do that on purpose. They're trying to get it to where got to ban the guns. Well, England don't have no guns. Only the special police in England carry the guns. That's why that cop got killed. If he would have had a gun, he wouldn't have got killed. He would have stopped the guy.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, to be very accurate, it is possible for the British subjects to own a firearm if they're into hunting or sport shooting, but the gun has to be stored at the club where they are a member, a hunting club or a sport shooting club, and they can join, and that allows them to own a firearm as long as it's kept on the premises there. It's not exactly gun freedom, but it's not accurate to say the British people are not allowed to have guns. It's just incredibly restricted. You know, it's like here in the United States of America. You can actually own a machine gun. You just have to pay a hideous tax, you know, for the license to own a machine gun. The license actually costs more than the gun itself. They did the same thing with fireworks here in Hawaii when they banned firecrackers and all this other thing because the snowflakes were afraid of the loud noise. They came on out and said, all right, well, you can buy firecrackers as long as you buy a permit from the city. And, of course, the permit was 5 times the cost of the actual firecrackers. That's how they think. You know, they're not going to change anything. They're just going to take away something that you are free to do and then sell it back to you. And that's how they're all operating.
So if somebody breaks into your house in England, you got to say, wait a minute, I got to go to the gun club?
Well, you know, the British police actually say just let the crooks do what they're going to do. And it is not uncommon to hear a story about an elderly couple sitting at home watching TV, and all of a sudden some people just break through the back door and they come on in. It's all very polite and calm and predictable, and they just take the TV and all the valuables and they go on out. And that is what the British people are told they should do. And for a while they were trying to sell that here in the United States of America, except that our particular criminals are a lot more prone to violence than the British ones are, and there were, you know, rapes and beatings going on. So, but, I mean, it is ridiculous to have a government that is so afraid of an armed population that they think that being a victim of a crime is morally superior or politically superior to being able to defend your home and loved ones.
And that police officer, by the way, was a former soldier, so I doubt his compatriots are really liking the way the government, you know, it's such a joke. I mean, I don't know what to think. The British, the French, the German, and you know, this actually works against the globalists right now because 3 of the kids were from France.
Yes.
So that helps Marie Le Pen.
Yeah.
So I don't think this was like a, I'm sorry, I don't think it was a, I thought it was a real event. I don't think they could have used this right now because the globalists are really in trouble right now.
Well, I don't know. We're hearing about all these other things that are going on. There was that aborted a terror attack, mass ramming of people that happened at the same time. One possible reason to have something like that happen was to give the corporate media a reason not to look at the revelations coming out of Freedom Watch and Larry Klayman, where they have got the actual hard evidence that, yes, the Obama administration was spying on Donald Trump long before the FISA warrant was obtained through fraud, and spying on a lot of other people without the appropriate legal authority. And the corporate media doesn't want to report that. Remember all the way back when Monica Lewinsky was testifying before Congress about the stained blue dress and, you know, the Hummers in the Oval Office and all the rest of it, and she walked on out expecting a phalanx of corporate media prostitutes and correspondents to be asking her some questions, and the stairs were empty because while she was inside, Bill Clinton hauled off and launched cruise missile attacks into a couple of Middle Eastern countries, claiming that he had to blow up these biological weapons laboratories, which later turned out it was an aspirin factory. The owners sued the United States successfully for the cost of replacing the facility. So you, the taxpayer, not only got to pay for the $1.5 million pop cruise missile, plus all the crews deploying it and using it, you got to pay to replace the factory as well. But it's controlling the media. Again, it's right out of Wag the Dog.
Hey, Mike, real quick, I want to switch gears to Ukraine, and make sure you don't sit next to somebody who's from Ukraine and smokes into an ammunition depot.
Yeah, real. Well, you know, at one point they were saying it was sabotage, and they were saying, yeah, it was an accident with a cigarette. The reality is that it could have even been a drone strike. That thing was just waiting to be set on fire, and it's just a huge, huge disaster for the people living around it.
And then one more real quick thing with the Russian guy, was a former Duma member who got killed in Ukraine. Now, he was killed because he's a lot of shady dealings, makes $34,000 a year, and he has 5 cars, including a Bentley Continental and 2 Range Rovers, so that guy was dirty. He probably had a bad business deal, so they knocked him off.
Well, since he's dead, can I have one of his 5 cars? Because I'm still dealing with a 17-year-old Honda with a busted ignition lock now.
I don't even know how much a Bentley Continental costs. Isn't that over like 100 or 200 grand? So,
well, I don't know. As long as it's in better condition than what I'm driving now, I'm not going to be too picky.
All right, thanks, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. Getting on back here to the news. Trump is about ready to make a statement about the failure of Ryan Care, but of course the media, they're already dumping this on him. Oh, it's a huge defeat for Donald Trump. And no, Congress ganged up on him. Paul Ryan created a health care package that even Republicans couldn't get behind because it was just more Obamacare with different lettering on it. Now, getting on over to the war zones, the U.S. is increasing their involvement in Syria yet again, which is only adding to tensions, not just in the region, but the whole world. Everybody understands the more the U.S. pushes, the closer and closer they're coming to direct military confrontation with Russia and China. And that's a war I don't think this country can win, even with nuclear weapons. But it is getting out of control. Apparently the U.S. did an airstrike in Mosul. Got to get those. ISIS and Al-Qaeda. Apparently they killed everybody except a single 5-year-old girl. Well, send those planes back in and try it again. It's amazing. Absolutely amazing. Now, as you know, there is a war of words going on between Russia and Israel over Israel's continued incursions into Syria to bomb the Syrian army, apparently aiding ISIS and Al-Qaeda. And they did it the other day. They went on in. They were bombing Syrian forces to keep them away from a group of terrorists. And the Syrians actually shot back at Israel. The Syrians are still claiming they downed one of Israel's warplanes. Israel's denying it. But no matter, you will be asked to buy and pay for another replacement warplane for Israel if, in fact, it did happen. And Israel's attitude was, how dare you shoot at us while we're bombing your country? You anti-Semites, you. And Syria said, yeah, we're going to shoot at people who are in our country, bombing our people without our permission. And Russia came out and said to Israel, your days of going into Syria are now over, period, end of discussion. And they punctuated it with a cruise missile attack onto the very forces Israel was trying to protect. And then Netanyahu came out only yesterday and said, we're going to do whatever we want in Syria. We're Israel. We're above international law. You will not stop us. In fact, I have never officially received your demand that we stay out of Syria. So today, Lavrov is out there saying that Russia is going to judge Israel by its actions, not their words. Always good advice when dealing with Israel. Don't listen to what they're saying. Watch what they do. So that is building toward a confrontation, which again, the United States, going back to George W. Bush, has reached an agreement with Israel that if Israel gets into a major war, the U.S. will go to war on Israel's side, even if Israel starts that war. How is this an incentive to peace? When you go up to one of the most aggressive nations in human history and say, whatever you want to do, we will support you. Now, getting on back to that munitions depot in Ukraine, in Balakleya, it's nasty. They've had to evacuate 45,000 people from around the area. The fire is still going. The munitions are still cooking off and flying out over the residential areas. And this is a major setback for Poroshenko because this was the largest arms depot in Ukraine, and right now he's finding himself short of supplies with which to make war on the Donbass, and nobody wants to loan him any more money. So he is really in a serious position right now. And I would not rule out some kind of sabotage or deliberate attack to light up that depot, knowing it was going to leave Poroshenko with very few options to go. Now, story coming out of FortRuss.com is saying that things are a lot worse for Poroshenko than he's letting on. And it's saying that basically Ukraine has lost more than 30,000 forces in the Donbass and is refusing to admit it. Now, that's hardly news. During a war, the true numbers of the casualties are never admitted. I remember back during Vietnam, where the nightly news was saying, well, we lost 4 here, we lost 5 here, blah, 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 blah. And even though we were all just seeing so many families around us were getting those horrible letters. You know, your kid is not coming back home. It was only after Vietnam was over and lost that the government finally sort of said, well, we're catching up on the numbers, and it was really 60,000. Now, the U.S. is out there trying to claim that Russia is supporting the Afghans and the Talibans just to tick off the United States of America. Needless to say, Russia's denying it. And, guys, let's remember what happened the last time Russia was in Afghanistan. The Russians were killing the Afghanis. They were killing the Taliban. I don't exactly think they're ready to swap wet, sloppy kisses with each other just yet. I mean, it's weird. If you go back and you look at that history, the Taliban grew out of the forces the U.S. supported against Russia in Afghanistan. If you believe any of this nonsense, I have some of Saddam's nuclear weapons to sell you. Now, down in Turkey, Erdogan is really starting to alarm people. It's looking like his next presidential office ought to be a padded cell. And the European Union is now saying maybe it's time for Erdogan to be the next Yanukovych. In other words, it's time for a staged, provoked from outside coup d'etat to bring Erdogan down. Well, they already tried that a little while ago, and it failed miserably. And Erdogan has consolidated his power and his defenses since then, so a new one is going to be a lot harder to do. And if he does, in fact, get this referendum voted through, or if he's able to rig the election to make it look like it went through, he is going to be even more autocratic and tyrannical than he was before. This mucking about in Turkey, they've created a monster, and I got to tell you, I am not a believer in forecasting or predictions or anything like that, but I have read the works of Nostradamus, and he keeps talking about this Middle Eastern leader in a blue turban who ignites World War III. Now, Erdogan obviously doesn't wear a turban, but he does wear a lot of blue suits. It's enough to give you chicken skin, which is the Hawaii term for goosebumps, because we don't have a lot of geese over here. But it is a little weird here. Needless to say, once again, the U.S. senators, the finest senators that Israeli money can buy, are pushing through a new bill to tighten even more sanctions on Iran regarding its missile tests and other non-nuclear activities. And this is why this is so incredibly bogus. Iran made a deal with the P5+1. Iran is keeping to their commitments. Nobody can prove otherwise. Nobody's found any evidence otherwise. And the P5+1 deal said nothing about non-nuclear conventional weaponry, but the Get Iran cartel is trying to create a situation. All right, the nuclear thing is under control, but they've got ballistic missiles, they've got bombs and bullets. Yeah, so does the United States. Who's the one who's actually using them? It's cascading. I think the rest of the world is really getting fed up with the attitude of the federal U.S. government that they have some kind of a right to mess around with everybody else in the world. We've got to take a break for commercials here. I see we've got a caller waiting on the line, and we're going to take that phone call as soon as we come back from these words from our sponsors. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're going to go right to the phones. Bob in Las Vegas. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. I love those two new songs you have. I Want to Be a Pirate and that Davy Rockefeller song.
Yes. Davy Rockefeller.
Stuff.
Thank you very much. I'm trying to rotate some of the stuff back in, that we used to have. And the Davy Rockefeller, I figured, was timely because of his passing. That was actually written and recorded by a relative. And then we're going to start putting some of the other music in there. We're going to take Davy Rockefeller out, in fact, as of today, because it's no longer timely. He's gone on to meet his Lord and Master, Satan.
I would suggest you sell, if you make available a soundtrack of all the songs that you have playing on the show.
Well, if you go to WRHradio.com, about halfway down the page, there's a link that goes to a player of the full-length versions of all the songs that are on this show, including the music written by my lovely wife, the Lady Claire. So you can listen to it all there.
Okay, perfect. Mike, on the Obamagate scandal, do you think Obama knew something when he stated matter-of-factly, Donald Trump will not be president?
Well, yeah, I don't know that he actually knew anything, but it was very obvious that Obama and Hillary and the liberal Democrats were absolutely convinced they could steal the election. And I think one of the proofs that we have of that is Hillary hadn't even written a concession speech for election night. And normally any president or any candidate going into a race, whether it's governor, mayor, whatever, they'll write two speeches, the acceptance speech and the concession speech. Hillary didn't bother with a concession speech. She thought it was a slam dunk. Slam dunk. Trump's victory was so unexpected. I mean, she basically beat up John Podesta. They had to physically restrain her. I mean, she just absolutely lost it.
No, there's no question it was a landslide because 3 days out she canceled that fireworks display. She canceled the fireworks. I think they knew, like you said, you can't rig a landslide. This election was there was a lot bigger gap between the two than the results.
I would absolutely agree. Now, I don't know that Hillary herself canceled the fireworks. I think that was done by one of the lower level people who had a much firmer grasp on reality. The official story at the time was that they had not filed for the appropriate license for the fireworks show before the deadline.
Right.
But I think the fireworks were canceled by somebody who knew she wasn't going to win, but it's just like the closing days of World War II. You don't tell the Fuhrer he's messing up, or you're going to get shot. And in the context of that time, a lot of people, the Democrats and Hillary did not like, were dying. Seth Rich, the guy who had the barbell fall on his throat, and all this other nonsense going on back then.
And Brian Pagliano is still missing.
Yeah, Brian Pagliano is still missing. I'm going to keep you through the station. I'm going to keep you through station identification. Do not hang up. We'll be right back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And we're going to go back to Bob in Las Vegas. Bob, you had something else you wanted to share with us.
Yeah, Mike, I just wanted to finish up by saying I think the extent of Trump's win could have been comparable to Reagan's in 1984, his victory over Mondale. That's how much of a landslide I think it likely was.
I tend to agree because even here in Hawaii, in the run-up to the election, I found the Trump people were out there. I only ever saw one Hillary supporter, and she was so frustrated she was actually slapping passing cars with her Hillary sign. I used to wear around the Hillary for Prison T-shirt, and I wore it over to this little place on Kauai called Hanalei, where we have a friend who lives there. And if you ever saw the George Clooney movie, The Descendants, thank you, The Descendants, part of that was shot in that town. And it's old Hawaii. It's a wonderful place. People love to go there. And I wore that shirt around there just weeks before the election. And I only had 2 people who complained about it, and everybody else wanted to get their picture taken with me for the shirt. They didn't know who I was. I was just, you know, another tourist there, but they loved the shirt. And so I think that there was actually a lot more Trump support here than the official numbers, but it's hard to find out because our current election system is designed to facilitate election fraud and to conceal it. And that means afterwards you can't go back and double-check what actually happened without a huge amount of legal effort and legal cost. It's set up to just be opaque and removed from the voter. You are just required to accept that when corporate media tells you this candidate won, that's just the reality, and how dare you even suggest that our election system could ever be rigged. Remember last October? Obama was out there saying, when Donald Trump first said there's always a possibility the election could be rigged, and Obama came out and said, that's ridiculous. Trump is just being a kook conspiracy theorist. Our elections are perfectly honest. They could never, ever be rigged. Right. And then, of course, after the election was over, we had Jill Stein coming on out, said we need recounts because obviously this election was rigged. And the recounts did reveal election fraud, all favoring Hillary Clinton, at which point Hillary Clinton came on out and said, well, obviously Russia was rigging this election. And they've kept that theme going since then, that Russia was rigging the election for Donald Trump by helping Hillary Clinton, which doesn't make any sense to anybody except a liberal. And then, of course, now when Trump has come into office saying we're going to be taking a good look at last year's election for cheating, and you had all of these liberals out there, even the NAACP is out there saying, don't you dare investigate if the election was dishonest. Don't you dare do that. You're being racist. You're being discriminatory. You're being a kook. It's a circus. It really is a circus. And if it were not literally the future of our nation at stake in all of this stuff, we would laugh at the absurdity of it.
Right. I mean, we were told that Hillary won Nevada, but I don't recall seeing any Hillary Clinton bumper stickers. I saw, the majority that I saw were Trump. I saw some Bernie Sanders bumper stickers, but I didn't see one Hillary Clinton sign or bumper sticker.
Well, there was somebody who did do a challenge in one of the Nevada counties, and I think they found out that, yeah, in point of fact, they found a huge amount of election fraud favoring Hillary Clinton. But we had the same thing here in Hawaii. There were Trump stickers and Trump hats and Trump shirts everywhere. I hardly ever saw anything for Hillary Clinton. And most of those people looked really, really stoned when I did, which makes a lot of sense when you remember that the Clintons' political fortunes are founded on that CIA gun and drug running operation in Arkansas in the 1980s. So I think Hillary's real constituency are all the drug dealers in the country who want one of their own to be the President of the United States of America. No, that's not a joke. I mean, think back on Prohibition.
I believe it.
On all the rum runner gangster families who always kept one of their children isolated and clean to be able to run for Congress or the White House. And again, the indications are that's where the Kennedy family fortune came from. Because at the start of Prohibition, old Joe Kennedy was middle class, and somehow at the end of Prohibition he was a multimillionaire. And there were allegations that he was a bootlegger, a rum runner, and that he laundered the money through the Boston Archdiocese. And then he aimed all three of his sons into politics. And, of course, John F. Kennedy got the White House. Robert F. Kennedy almost got to the White House. Teddy Kennedy almost got across Chappaquiddick Bridge. But, you know, that's it. People with money think they can buy their way into power. And certainly the criminal class has got more money than almost anybody else in this country.
Okay, Mike. Well, you and Claire have a great weekend. Thank you so much.
We
certainly
will. We're going to be sitting around an auto repair place getting the ignition fixed on our Honda. Peter in Dallas. Aloha, Peter. Welcome to our show. What's on your mind today?
Hi, Michael.
Hi.
Hello, Michael.
You're on the air.
Hey, I have an idea for a national health care system.
Yes?
I think it could make the liberals and conservatives happy, and I just wanted to give you an opportunity to rip it to shreds.
Okay.
It's pretty simple. If you can afford it, you buy it. If you want it and you can't afford it, you basically can borrow the money from the federal government. You have a tab. If things turn around, you pay off your tab. If things don't turn around, well, your state, if you have one, pays the federal government at that time. So nobody's off the hook, and everybody has access to health care.
Well, I don't think the federal government is in a position to loan money to Americans for medical care. They're having to borrow as much as they are already. The government's flat broke, and that puts a real damper on any plan. But again, I think Ross Perot had absolutely the right idea. Let's look at other countries and find ones that actually do have a healthcare system that works to keep their people healthy, and let's just copy that. But the problem in this country is that going all the way back to Richard Nixon's signing of the Health Maintenance Act, they removed restrictions on profit-making from medical care, and it went from being about the health of the American people to just another business opportunity. And it was at that point we started seeing the prices just go right through the roof because our current medical industrial complex wants to make money. And they make more money the sicker you are, the longer you are sick. And that's why they're not interested in actually finding any cures for anything. What they want to sell are treatments that continue month after month, year after year, guaranteeing a revenue stream to them. And if you're not sick, the new thing is we're going to force perfectly healthy people to buy our product, meaning the vaccines. And again, it's all about the money. And if the vaccines make you sick, well, that's more money for the medical industrial complex because they're going to have to treat the symptoms that were created by those vaccines you were forced to buy.
Well, you're suggesting then we just take the profit motive out of medicine. That's the fix. I mean, is that really where you're headed?
Yeah, because it worked before Nixon. We had really good medical care when the focus was kept on medical care.
Well, okay. Very good.
All right. All right. Thanks an awful lot, Peter. We're going to let you go. Now then, the Philippines all of a sudden are becoming a major focus for politics in the region. As you know, everything was all hunky-dory, and the Philippines were on board with this U.S. effort to separate China from the South China Sea. And then Obama stuck his nose in where it was not wanted, chastising Duterte for the very aggressive Philippine war on drug dealers. And Obama went on down there and said, you shouldn't be doing this. We love our drug dealers in the United States of America. We take care of them. And Duterte said, no, you mind your own business, forerunner of him telling the EU to mind their own business. And so now all of a sudden, we're starting to see this propaganda campaign that Duterte may be aligned with Russia. Insert ominous music here. And what does the United States do with countries that are suspected of being aligned with Russia? Well, we're going to have to overthrow the government, put in somebody that's going to be a little bit more reasonable with the U.S. policies, which is, you know, sneer at Russia, sneer at China, go easy on the drug smugglers, because that's what makes America great. All right, we're going to do a shout-out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. Let's see. Okay, I'm getting a message from our control room. Does anybody know Bitcoin cryptocurrency really well? Apparently there's somebody who's an associate of RBN, needs somebody willing to communicate with them. So you can call in to the call-in line, 800-313-9443. Mike will take your contact information and forward it along. And, yeah, it's a bit of a mystery. When the Bitcoin first came along, in theory, it sounds great. I haven't had a lot of exposure to Bitcoin. I tried to set up a wallet one time. They wanted a monthly fee. I was recently involved with another cryptocurrency. Unfortunately, it has now been banned here in the state of Hawaii. So, end of story. But it does need to be, I think, simplified in order to make it really commercially viable to the consumer market. Now then, getting on back to the war zones, the United Nations is now complaining that sanctions that are being imposed on North Korea are hindering their ability to send in food aid. Now, before all this talk about weapons of war and nuclear weapons and Kim Jong-un and everything, North Korea was already in serious trouble. They've had a string of natural disasters. There's a lot of hunger there. The United Nations was trying to send assistance in there, and now because of all the sanctions being piled on, the UN is saying we're having difficulty being able to do anything about what's going on, which may also be their excuse down in Yemen. And I agree, from the outside, based on what we've been told in the corporate media, it looks like North Korea's government is rapidly becoming as dysfunctional as that here in the United States of America. But ultimately, I think the political psychosis that we're seeing is actually appears to be contagious. One world leader starts to go really crazy and get aggressive, and all the others just try and keep up. It does seem weird. Let's talk about Belarus, because it looks like Belarus is now in play. There have been riots down there. Belarus is saying it's all coming from outside. And so we're seeing this article from Pravda, where it looks like the U.S. is intending for the president of Belarus, Alexander Lukashenko, to basically follow Gaddafi's fate. They're going to create a color revolution in his country, kill Lukashenko, and bring Belarus into the Western sphere of influence. But apparently, Lukashenko isn't being as naive about these things as Gaddafi, or maybe he just learned from the examples of Gaddafi and Saddam Hussein and all these other deposed leaders. They're coming down hard on any civil unrest, any disruption. They're just going to stamp down on it. And already they're out there saying that these riots, these protests, were not organic, naturally occurring expressions of civil unrest. They are organized and directed from outside. They've already arrested 26 people for being part of a clandestine program to kick up civil unrest and destabilize Belarus, just like they did in Ukraine. See, here's the problem. The U.S. has been playing this game on countries since the end of World War II, at least 50 times. And they succeed about half. But they succeeded because the people in the targeted countries did not know that what was going on in front of their eyes was not a true revolution or civil war, but outside agitators who were overthrowing the government to put in a puppet ruler. The CIA did it in Iran in 1953. They did it in Chile in 1973. They tried to do it in Ukraine, haven't done very well there. But now, because of the internet and the independent media, the people of the world are now awake and realize when they start seeing riots and protests and violence in their country, they know it's not their fellow countrymen. It's not their brothers and sisters and their friends and relatives. These are outside paid agitators trying to bring their democratically elected governments down to replace them with a dictatorship. Every time the U.S. goes out with one of these interventions, one of the big lies that you are told is we're bringing democracy to those people. When you look at the history of all these coups d'etats and overthrows by the United States into other countries, not one of them has ever actually produced a real democracy. They have installed a dictator and an illusion of democracy. All right, we're going to go to Mark in North Carolina. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, how you doing there, Mike? Let me just, I just wanted to say that,
I can barely hear you. What's going on?
I had to lower the computer. Okay.
Okay.
So you hear me any better now?
I can hear you just fine.
All right. As far as Belarus, isn't Belarus really part of the Russian Republic? And if not, it's so close.
Okay, it's one of the Russian republics, plural. When the former Soviet Union fell apart, it balkanized into all the original nations that had existed before the union of the Soviet Socialist republics. And what they have there now today is something where all these countries are in the same political alignment, but they still enjoy a great deal of autonomy. If you look at a map, the reason for this attempt to take control of Belarus is part of this program to encircle Russia itself. Because if you look at all of the nations around there, most of them are under NATO control or U.S. control. Belarus is still a wild card, and that is why it's being targeted, to turn it into a vassal of the Western world in order to box Russia in. And I don't think Russia's going to allow that to happen.
But do you think Putin would be smart? I don't know if the Belarus would want it to send in Russian troops to make sure it doesn't happen.
Well, I think Belarus is doing the right thing. They have identified the fact that they're a target for a clandestine U.S. overthrow, and they're cracking down on it. Putin's already done that in Russia, kicked out USAID and a bunch of these other NGOs, which are always at the forefront of these covert government regime changes. And I think Belarus is about to do the same. Like I said, this old recipe doesn't work anymore because everybody sees what's really going on.
One thing I noticed, too, is some of these religious groups are actually looking for trouble there. One of the reasons why, I don't know if you noticed, a lot of Mormons seem hostile towards Russia today, including Glenn Beck, the guy who ran there for president in Utah, who actually ran for president of Utah there, Egg McMuffin or whatever his name is. And,
well, it's not just Russia today. I mean, the current establishment, and it's got nothing to do with their being Mormon or anything else right now. The current establishment is realizing that the good old days of being able to feed the American people a bunch of nonsense and be believed are gone, and they're declaring war on anybody that is out there, that is being listened to by the people of planet Earth, that is telling a different story than the official U.S. government propaganda. And it's not just Russia Today. They're going after Sputnik News. They're going after the independent media. And they're all saying, well, they're all right-wing, as if somehow that's going to discredit us, because if we're not Democrat and left-wing liberals, then somehow we're automatically inferior and less trustworthy, which is absolutely nonsense. But they're trying to get back to a world where they can lie to the American people with impunity. They're not going to get there, by the way.
The reason I mentioned the Mormons is because I looked it up, and evidently the Russians have thrown out Mormon missionaries. At least the Greek Orthodox Church wanted them out. The Russian Orthodox Church saying the Mormons are basically a cult, and they kicked out the missionaries.
Well,
I think that might
That's a completely separate issue, I think, from Glenn Beck and the hostility toward Russia today. Anyway, Mark, got to let you go. Got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back with another phone call. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, and we're going to go right back to the phones here. Shelby in Wyoming, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
I'm surprised it got on. Okay, well, I was calling, I listen to your show quite a bit, and I'm trying to keep up on everything, but I'd like to hear your honest take on the economy. What's going on? I hear you talk about retail stores closing down and everything else. I read about it. I look at stocks in the local newspaper every day. I actually live in Jackson, Wyoming, and it's a fairly recession-resistant town just because many rich folk congregate there. But I'm getting kind of worried, and I'd like to hear what your statement is.
Well, you have a right to be worried because the problem exists on many planes. The simplest explanation is for an economy to be functioning, currency must be flowing freely at all levels and into all necessary sectors of development. Unfortunately, as this country has descended into fascism, more and more the wealth is concentrated at the very, 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 very top. And too little of it is getting back down to the lower levels to keep the economy going. And the reason we're seeing all these iconic retailers like Sears going out of business is because people don't have money to go and buy things. There's an attempt to just drive wages and salaries down to make corporations more profitable, but it is a false dream because certainly for manufacturing and retail corporations, if you don't have customers, you're not going to be profitable no matter how much you're cheating your own workers. It just doesn't work on out. And too much wealth inequality will destabilize any society. Now, the big problem we have is the private central banks, which are basically allowed to create money out of thin air and then loan it to the public at interest. Of course, we're not allowed to create money out of thin air to pay it back. And it is not really a system of economics so much as it is a system of enslavement. But it's naturally unstable because over time, private central banks will create more debt than money to actually pay that debt. And the debt grows and grows and grows until it starts to lock up the system. And that's what we're seeing in places like Greece and Cyprus, in fact, all over Europe and here in the United States of America. There has to be a reset of some kind. But the money junkies don't want to let go of this system that favors them, and so ultimately the only reset that happens is an absolute crash. And it does seem like we're headed into one right now. Now, the stock market numbers look very impressive, but we know they're being rigged to use as a political banner, to wave at the people and say, look, the economy's great, look at the soaring Dow here and everything. But analysts are saying our stock market is way overvalued, and that's a bad thing.
Let me ask you a question, Mike.
Sure.
Okay. I'm a plumber, so how do you feel about trade? Do you think they will continue to at least sustain a little bit of sustain through a crash, or do you think that we're pretty much all going down?
No, there's going to be a continuum here. I mean, obviously somebody with a really useful skill like plumbing or electrical work or carpentry or anything that actually produces something, they're going to be less vulnerable to a downturn than people who've got degrees in like art history or women's studies or something like that, because those are the first, those will be first to go. So having a really saleable skill, a computer engineer, civil engineering, any of that stuff, they're going to be less vulnerable to the downturn because people are always going to need their pipes to be repaired. They're always going to need the wiring redone in business buildings and so forth. They're going to need cables laid for their computers and so forth and so on.
Awesome. Well, that's good to hear. Well, and one other question. I'm sure you've touched on this before in your show, so how in your personal opinion, I know you can't give an exact, you know, you're not a magician or a wizard, but do you really think that it's going to be 2017 that everything's going to turn down?
It's hard to say. We got to take a break for commercials, and I'll answer your question when we come back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And in response to the question, when is it going to start falling apart, it's very difficult for prognosticators to actually say for a couple of reasons. First and foremost, we are dependent on the information that the Federal Reserve and the government put on out. In some cases, that information is no longer being provided. Remember, some years back, they stopped publishing what's called the M3 aggregate, which is the total amount of currency in circulation and a direct measure of the real inflation that we're dealing with. Now we have an inflation calculation that is based on selected indicators and leaves out food and fuel, which is where inflationary pressures first show up. We know the unemployment numbers are an absolute joke. We know the stock market's being rigged. So that blurs things. The other problem is that we're all trying to forecast where the economy is going on the basis of the rules, the regulations, the laws. We have a lot of people in the economic system who simply don't play by the rules, and we have a government that will change the rules whenever they feel it will give them an advantage. But I think in a lot of real ways, I think the economic shutdown has already started. When you hear about iconic stores like Sears going out of business, when you hear about shopping malls that are shutting down, it is very obvious this is no longer an economy that works for the people and the country. It's still working really good for those up at the top, which is why they're happy with it. But I think in a lot of real ways, our economy is already shutting down. And a big part of it, of course, is that we have covertly been in a wartime economy for 15 years now. And money from the American taxpayer that should be spent repairing the roads, repairing the bridges, the rail system, the infrastructure as a whole, has been spent on war. And we now have a situation where engineers are estimating that our power grid, everyone's always talking about, oh, the terrorists are going to take down the power grid. They don't need to. It's on the verge of collapse itself. It's going to need something like $5 trillion worth of work to get our power grid back up to where it should be to support a society as complex as the United States of America. This would be a good time if we could find where that's $10 trillion the Pentagon misplaced went to. So in a lot of ways, I think the economy has already started to shut down because it's not working for everybody. It's only working for the ultra rich. Anything else, Shelby?
Yeah, I've always honestly wondered, since you're in Hawaii, I forget what island you said you were on, but I honestly have always wondered how you always speak of being ready and prepping and everything else. I've always wondered how you were doing that on the island.
Well, I live on the island of Oahu, and my prepping is basically the same as it would be anywhere else. Storable food, lots of water, things to keep Claire and I alive, functional, and moderately happy if the supply chain breaks down, which unfortunately here in Hawaii, we're a little more vulnerable to supply chain disruption than people in the heartland of America who are already out there planting gardens. We can't do that. I've got a few plants out back. I joke about the pineapple plant. I joke about
although you do have fishing and seafood and whatnot, you know, to sustain, which is a plus.
Well, unfortunately, a lot of our seafood glows in the dark now.
Oh, I see. Yes, Fukushima.
Yeah. Yes.
Yes. Well, Mike, well, it's good talking to you, and yeah, thanks for your info.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go here. Get on back here to the news here. We're about 22 minutes away from the lovely Lady Claire. Now, the Pentagon, according to Zero Hedge, is denying that they were trying to hide this study from 2015 that found $125 billion in waste, money that was being spent that didn't need to be spent, And the Pentagon is denying that they were trying to shelve it or hide it, even though they're admitting they haven't actually made much headway in terms of trimming out that $125 billion in waste. The Pentagon's never been audited. They're just used to this idea that you, the American people, are going to work hard and give them your money, and they will spend it on things like sticky foam cannons and all kinds of... They'll spend it on boondoggles like the F-35. You know, because there's always more money out there. There's always more money out there for us to just build the latest whiz-bang toy here. Now then, getting on to the economic news. Investment Watch blog is reporting the real estate market has been pumped up to support the fake economy. When that bubble bursts, it's going to take a lot of other stuff with it. And the reason for that, and we saw this back in 2008, same exact thing. Flip real estate back and forth to drive up its value, make it look like it was worth more than it had been a couple of weeks ago. And the reason you do that is because it generates instant equity. Because if the house is being flipped back and forth and it's more and more expensive, then you have a lot more of a gap between the equity value of your home and the mortgage that you owe on it. And in that space is where you're allowed to borrow more money against the equity in your home. The problem is when that equity vanishes, you have a lot of loans coming due because they're going to want their money. It's no longer secured. But it's artificially inflated. And during that whole run-up to the mortgage-backed security fraud, we were seeing a lot of real estate frothing is the term, where you're just churning as much sales in real estate as you can to artificially inflate the prices. And Claire and I actually got hit by that twice, because when we first moved here, we were over in renting a condo on the other side of the island. We were very happy there. We were very happy there. And then all of a sudden, back in 2008, it got sold. We're going to sell it. It's worth so much more money to us. So we had to move to another home. And we were only there a couple of months, and all of a sudden that was being sold and flipped back and forth. And we lucked out finding this particular place where we live right now. Part of the problem is the entire system runs on lines of credit. Sears is actually getting inventory, and they owe the manufacturers for the inventory, which they pay back when you actually buy the product, and nobody's buying. Apparently, some of Sears' insurance companies are starting to cancel their policies. We have a Sears down here at the bottom of the hill. They have an elevator in the middle of the store. It's been out of commission for months. And it's very obvious looking at it. It's just blocked off, elevator out of order. There's no repairman. There's no tools. There's nothing. They have just made the decision they're not going to fix that elevator because they just don't have the money for it. Now, Russia is getting ready to break with the international banking system. And we're talking about SWIFT, the Worldwide Interbank Financial Telecommunications System. It's called SWIFT. SWIFT just disconnected North Korea. It's a form of punishment. If you don't do what the private central bankers do, we will cut you off. Well, Russia is already making preparations to go it alone and just not be involved with that international cartel of private central banks anymore. And one of the after effects of sanctions and that misguided oil price war, Russia is learning how to be self-sufficient. And the globalists are in a panic. Oh my goodness, how can you be self-sufficient? You're not supposed to be self-sufficient. You're supposed to be dependent on the rest of us for everything that you need, because dependency is slavery. And Russia's saying, nah, we're going to try something else here. One indication is that right now a yuan clearing bank has opened in Moscow. Russia and China have dumped the U.S. dollar in bilateral trade, and we're talking about two major powerhouse economies that have just said, we're not going to go through the dollar anymore. And that is the real agenda behind this push to war with Russia and China. It's not about North Korea. It's not about terrorism. It's not even about Crimea. This is a war between the United States Federal Reserve Note and the Russian ruble and Chinese yuan. That's what it's about. That's what all this bloodshed is about. That's what this risk of World War III is all about. It's an argument over which brand of ink and paper we're going to be using for the next 100 years. This so-called clash of civilizations is a war between banking systems, between private central bank enslavement and countries that want to go back to banking that serves the nation and its people. All right, let's grab some phone calls here. Wes in Idaho, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, Senate Bill 2302, Stop Radical Islamic Invasion of America. Shouldn't Trump be doing something about stopping this invasion so we are not going to be like Germany or Sweden?
Well, he's trying to. He put out the travel ban, but, you know, the liberals keep trying to block it. Now, there's a little bit of good news there because the judge in Virginia has refused to issue an injunction against the travel ban. Now, there are still 2 other states, one of them being right here in Hawaii, that are trying to block it, and they're going to have to go through the court cases on that one. But Trump is trying to protect our borders, and the globalists, the New World Order, the liberals are all fighting him tooth and nail. They want the world's population to be blurred together, and they don't care how many people get robbed or murdered or raped to do it because they believe in this eventual glory of the New World Order. In a lot of ways, the liberals are very much like the Scientologists, who are perfectly okay with committing these horrible crimes against those who don't want to do what the church tells them to do, because they believe in the long run they're serving humanity and they're going to make the whole world a much better place. Even though they're committing acts of terrorism today, they justify that. And the liberals do the same thing. Yes, your kids are getting raped by these criminals that we're importing from other countries, but in the long run, it's for the betterment of humankind. And liberals really, in fact, we should call them the Church of Liberalology. Their entire political philosophy is founded on an academic hoax, and that's why all of these grand plans the liberals come up with fail so badly.
Can you comment directly on Senate Bill 2302?
I have not actually read the text of it. I've seen it summarized. But I think the bill errs in using the word Muslim because that would lead to a challenge based on religious discrimination. Trump's travel ban is against specific nations, not against a religion. The corporate media and the liberals are trying to say, oh, he hates Muslims, it's a Muslim ban. No, it's a ban on people from specific countries. And if you are coming from one of those countries, it doesn't matter if you're Muslim, Christian, Jewish, atheist, Pastafarian, Zarathustrian, or whatever, you're going to have the same degree of trouble coming into this country. The religion is not the issue. The issue is these countries hate the United States of America, and for a very simple reason. We've been mucking around their countries. We've been dropping bombs on them. We've been drone striking them. We've been trying to overthrow their governments. Nobody's going to have that stuff happen to them and remain entirely cheerful. These other countries don't hate us for our freedoms. They hate us because they're just going about their lives, trying to take care of their family, and all of a sudden there's a hideous explosion, and people they've grown up with are lying in bloody shreds at their feet, and the shrapnel is all stamped made in the USA. That's why they hate us. And that's why Trump is correct to say that we should be very careful who we let on in. Now, the funny thing is the media is being very, very hypocritical about all this, because Trump is not the first president to ban groups of people, and the president is allowed to do this under Title VIII. Reagan banned immigration to specific groups of people 5 times during his administration. Bush Sr. banned immigration to a specific group 1 time. Bill Clinton banned immigration to specific groups of people 12 times during his administration. George Bush Jr. banned immigration to specific groups for people 6 times, and Barack Obama banned immigration to specific groups of people 19 times. And Donald Trump does it once, and they act like it's the end of the world.
In 1,400 years of Islam's existence. They have always been at war with the rest of the world.
Well, wait a minute. That's not fair to say. Look at what the Catholics did going into the Crusades. I mean, the idea of a holy war, a war fought for God, is actually a Catholic invention. And yes, the Muslims adopted it to fight back, but it's not entirely one-sided. There was the European effort to reclaim the Holy Lands in this belief that, you know, Jesus was actually a white guy. And then you have the continuing aggressions by Israel against its Muslim neighbors. It's not fair to say that Muslims have been at war with the world for however many years because the world has been equally at war with them. I mean, I think you need to go back and really look at your history and get away from this propaganda that the Muslims are all to blame, because they're not. Everybody shares the blame because everybody has been an aggressor at some point in this horrible history. Thank you for the call, Wes. We're going to let you go. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We got 3 more phone calls we're going to try and get through before the top of the hour. And the lovely lady Claire, Ralph in California. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
No, aloha. Yeah, I was just wondering your knowledge or anything that you see in the future regarding blockchain technology and cryptocurrency.
I'm not an expert on the subject. I did put out a call a little earlier in the program where one of our RBN people needs some contacts who can talk about it. I tried to get into Bitcoin, then I tried to get into this other one I think was called Cloak Coin, but they've already made that illegal here in Hawaii. Certainly the Federal Reserve is trying to find a way to justify the banning of any alternate currency to the Federal Reserve note. But they're in a bit of a pickle because their original charter didn't grant them exclusivity. And that's why when you look at the front of a Federal Reserve note, it says this note is legal tender for all debts, public and private. It doesn't say it's the only one. And if 2 people get together and say, you can settle your debt to me for white seashells, that's now a valid, legitimate alternative currency. The same thing for silver and gold. We've got these states that are now removing capital gains on silver and gold so that they can be used as currency. And the cryptocurrencies are likewise, as long as people accept them, they can be used for commerce. My concern about cryptocurrency is it has to be easy to use, secure, and given the amount of cybercrime going on right now, I'm not entirely sure I'm ready to trust a significant part of my poverty to its clutches.
Okay. Well, what was the ruling? How did Hawaii ban that? Like, what did they...
I didn't get into the details. It's just when I went to the website, there was a notice saying we cannot serve you anymore. Hawaii has now banned this form of currency. So, you know, sorry, that's just the way it is.
Okay. All right. Well, hopefully you get somebody on there and more information would be good.
Well, we can, but it's not a top priority for me right now. All righty, let's see. We're going to go to Angela in North Carolina. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. I got a question. Is our military not supposed to keep Americans free and back our Constitution? And why are they playing exercises everywhere and not here taking care of what we paid them to do and using that income that we pay them with to keep our economy going?
Well, they're basically out doing what they're being told to do by the civilian leadership, but the civilian leadership, like the military, may pay lip service to preserving, protecting, and defending the Constitution. They don't actually seem to be doing much of it. And right now we're seeing a government that is in fear for its continued existence. And when you have a government that is afraid for its continued existence, they're going to start ignoring the rules and just do whatever it takes to preserve their wealth and power. Okay?
Okay, I'll just say, hey, guys, come home. We need you. We're not free. And thank you, Mike.
All right, well, thank you. And I apologize to our other caller that was on hold. I'm not going to be able to take your call. We've got to take a break for station identification. We'll be back with the lovely lady Claire after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, hour number 3. And we're going to close the phone lines because this is the hour of clarification. And so we're going to be doing that here a little bit here. And Claire, what's the first thing you want to talk about?
Well, the first thing that just came in, and I just posted it, what really happened, is a very disturbing account by Yemeni pediatric doctors. And they're seeing something that is very bizarre, very weird, and they're seeing a rash of deformities in babies who are born and terribly premature births to the point where they cannot save the pregnancies. And Mike, I remember looking at the image of this poor little child who will never ever be able to achieve its potential and will probably die very, very young. And I remembered, I know what that looks like, and I know when it happened. And apparently, it appears that if you take a look at a kid who was poisoned by DU in the womb, depleted uranium,
yeah.
Same exact features. Looks like our Saudi brothers are using depleted, uranium weapons, which are going to cause these deformities.
Which they're going to get from the United States,
yeah.
Because the Saudis do not have nuclear enrichment facilities.
Yeah.
So they're obviously getting them from the United States, and we're seeing these deformities. Most of these kids in Yemen, I mean, they're on the edge of an absolutely catastrophic famine across the entire country.
Right.
All in this argument over, how dare you stand up and not want a U.S. puppet ruler.
Yeah, but to think that these people are so morally unscrupulous that they would be poisoning children in the womb with this stuff,
They
my mind
were
reels.
doing it to the people of Iraq.
I know.
And even worse, and this is something that they've kept the lid on at this point, is they were also doing it to Americans who were serving in the Iraq War, and they were exposed to this depleted uranium. They mustered out of the military, came on back home, started their family, started getting massive birth defects, huge epidemic of severe birth abnormalities in the families of our returned veterans.
And that's going to happen to the Saudi vets as well.
And, the U.S. government basically through the VA is saying, we're going to pay for the care and everything as long as you do not talk to the press.
Yeah, it just broke my heart. Going over into Iraq.
I have a question for you before we go any further.
Okay.
Did the Nazis ever use weapons that deformed the babies of the survivors?
I do not know.
I don't think so.
I don't think so.
All right, we're getting back to Iraq then.
Yeah. Apparently, the Iraqi Popular Forces are warning that they will target U.S. forces if they don't leave Iraq after the defeat of ISIS. You think maybe they don't want us there, Michael? I mean, am I being silly or what?
Well, no, of course they don't want us there. And Tillerson, I think, made a major mistake the other day when he came on out and said, yeah, we're going to stick around here for a long time. And the people of Iraq do not want the Americans in their country. The people of Afghanistan do not want the Americans in their country. The people of Libya do not want the Americans in their country. The people of Yemen do not want either the Saudis or the Americans in their country.
No.
And, at this point, as we are obviously on the doorstep of World War III, we know who the bad guys are.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of Americans don't want to face up to it, but then the big mistake of the German people was they refused to face up to the fact that their government was being aggressive and warlike and invading other people's countries, and ultimately led to disaster for everybody involved here.
And what worries me, because we have family who are and friends who are in the military, if the U.S. forces are ordered by Washington to stay in Iraq, they're going to be fair game. And I have to ask, how many deaths of our military people is acceptable to the White House and to the Pentagon as the cost for the U.S. military staying in Iraq? I'm betting it's going to be very, very high.
Well, actually, I am betting that after the first Americans get killed by the Iraqi troops, the U.S. will go on in and say, well, obviously we need yet another new government in Iraq who will understand that we're the good guys, and we'll see Iraq War version, 6?
Something like that.
Something like that.
And, the last time this happened, the guy who issued that threat, Muqtada al-Sadr, remember him?
I remember him.
And if he gets sick enough of American intervention in Iraq, he'll bring the band back together because he was the spiritual leader of the Mahdi army, which was a formidable fighting force in Iraq.
I've been hearing rumblings he's already doing that. It's very low-key, it's very out of the light, but he's already, what I'm hearing is he's already reestablishing his communications network.
I mean, he knows all the generals, he knows all the big guys. I would say that our staying in Iraq after getting rid of ISIS, big mistake on so many levels. I really would.
Well, the United States is not really in Iraq to get ISIS.
No, I know.
The agenda is still to carve off a piece of Iraq and a piece of Turkey and a piece of Syria for an independent Kurdistan.
Right.
And again, it's part of the larger agenda of breaking up Middle Eastern nations into little tiny nations that are easy for Israel and the United States to bully around.
Fiefdoms.
Fiefdoms. We're going to take a quick moment to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. And getting on back here, there we are.
I'd like to talk a little bit about Russia and the current energy and just the absolute illness of demonization of Russia and Putin. And what the U.S. doesn't want to see happen is a greater Europe that puts together Europe, which needs Russia's natural gas, and Russia as a bloc. And they are doing everything they can. I mean, we've looked at the sanctions, asymmetrical attacks on Russia's markets and currencies, the arming and training.
Assassination of Russian diplomats.
In Ukraine and Syria. And the question that the article asks, will Washington risk World War III to block an emerging EU-Russia superstate?
Yes, they will.
My short answer is heck yes.
Yes, they will.
They will move heaven and earth to prevent that to happen.
The conventional thinking in Washington, D.C., and unfortunately President Trump appears to have been sold this particular lemon, is that absent a new world war, the United States will cease to be a global power. And that certainly is true, but I don't think the United States needs to be a global power. The money junkies certainly want that, but ordinary Americans like you and I and the folks over at the church and our neighbors and everything, we don't need the United States to be a globe-straddling superpower as long as we have a working economy that allows us to just have a comfortable lifestyle. That's all we really want. It's just a comfortable lifestyle. We're not really demanding the way the money junkies are, where there must be more, always more.
And I'd like to also talk a little bit about North Korea. Apparently, this pile-on of sanctions against North Korea is hindering food aid, and this is getting really nasty. And the starvation of children, allegedly to soften a country up for invasion and or occupation, is not a new tool. We used it in Iraq, and I remember Madeleine Albright, and I think the figure was 500,000 kids starved to death?
Yes.
And she said that's a perfectly acceptable outcome. To whom?
I remember when Barbara Bush was told about that, and she said, why should I trouble my beautiful mind with such things?
Yeah. And then we have some more Russia bashing going on. A U.S. general, Russia perhaps supplying the Taliban. And this guy is General Scaparotti. And he told the Senate Armed Services Committee that he has seen the influence of Russia of late. Is he reading tea leaves, or is he completely deranged?
No, basically the default position is anybody who is not 100% cooperating with the United States is obviously a Russian stooge. And as I mentioned earlier in the program here, let us please remember that the last time Russia was in Afghanistan, they weren't exactly getting along with the Taliban. In fact, they were killing them. They were helicopter attacks and so forth. And the Taliban grew out of the Mujahideen that were U.S. allies against Russia.
Right.
So this idea, what they're looking for is a scapegoat.
Yes.
We're not doing well in Afghanistan. In fact, the U.S.-backed puppet regime is actually only in control of about 60% of Afghanistan.
If that much.
Mostly focused around the oil wells and the poppy fields. And they're looking for somebody to blame for Afghanistan now having become the longest single war in U.S. history. Well, it's not because of a failure of policy or anything that we did wrong, or the fact that Afghanistan has a long history of being a graveyard of empires. It must be the fault of Russia. Anything bad that happens, it's Russia's fault. And, you know, Vladimir Putin stole our car yesterday.
Okay, it was a terrorist attack. He didn't want to
No, it
walk.
was a hate crime because Putin hates walking.
But I would like to hope that this General Scaparrotti just cools his jets. Trying to blame the epic failure of a nearly 16-year-old utterly failed U.S. NATO occupation on Russia is absurd, and there's no evidence. There's zero, zip, none that he was able to present.
Well, he's still coming out of the mindset of the first Cold War. We don't need no stinking evidence. We will tell you, the corporate media will tell you, we tell you, you will believe it, and all will be well, which was certainly not the case here.
No,
definitely not. If there's a reason for hope of a non-nuclear outcome for all of this that's going on, it's the fact that so many of these establishment figures are Cold War fossils who still don't understand how the fundamental nature of information flow has now changed in our society. And it's not going to be turned around and removed with smear jobs on the independent media.
Yeah, it's just not going to last. Saw an interesting development that I thought was worth noticing. Apparently the U.S. Army has ordered a multi-million-dollar contract for support services as its Kuwaiti bases.
Well, knowing how the Pentagon puts out these contracts, that's one guy with a broom sweeping out the officers' club.
Yeah, okay. But it's interesting, and I didn't know this before I did some due diligence. Apparently we've got 10 U.S. military bases in Kuwait. And looking at the geography and looking at...
They're clustered around the oil fields.
They're clustered around the oil fields. And it was reported by AP in 2012 that having these massed bases there gave the White House flexibility for something like a strike on Iran, strike on Syria, etc., etc. But I have to wonder, Mike, the government is beefing up these bases right now, and Kuwait is a place for power projection in the Middle East, in Persian Gulf particularly, and Mike, this construction is due to be completed next March, spring of 2018. I've got to wonder what they're thinking about for spring of 2018 of next year.
They're trying to garrison their conquered provinces the way Rome did. Rome would go in, conquer a province, and they'd start putting up forts and garrisons and the rest of it. I'm still thinking about that Navy base that they're constructing on that island in the Gulf, which was very much not being publicized, and kind of makes you wonder what other still secret military bases are now under construction, and if this is in fact where much of that missing $10 trillion from the Pentagon went to.
Now you're talking about that base in the island in Yemen?
Yes.
That's technically Yemen's, but you know, it's not Yemen's anymore.
Well, they can't go on out and protect their own territory from the building of the U.S. base because they cannot get off the coast right now and past the Saudi blockade.
Yeah, it's very interesting out there. I'm wondering what is being planned for spring of next year.
Well, they're planning for power projection, and again, the reason they're trying to destabilize Belarus, I think, is they're trying to encircle Russia to limit its ability to fight back.
Yeah, that could definitely be a very valid reason for this happening. As reported today in antiwar.com, a U.S. airstrike killed 230 civilians in Mosul overnight. One single airstrike killed about 130, and the other 100 or so were killed in the surrounding area. We're talking about non-combatants, women, children, medically fragile, elderly.
Actually, they killed everybody but a single 5-year-old girl who somehow managed to survive, and I'm sure there's a warplane on its way in to finish her off under the theory, kill them all, let God sort them out.
Yeah. And this was in the Daily Mail today, and I felt compelled to comment on it. Jihadi terror manuals on how to use a car as a tool of war for mass murder can be found in just 2 minutes on Google and Twitter.
Well, what's going on here is very simple. This terror attack in London was seized on by the Brexit people, as an illustration of how open borders can bring a risk into your country. Then, of course, it came out that this particular individual, Khalid Massoud, was actually born in Britain. And so the Brexit people were saying, well, he was radicalized by all these people who are coming into our country without any vetting or control, and this is a pushback by saying, oh, no, he was radicalized by that evil Internet. And we've got to get more control on the Internet. And we're starting to see this in all of these governments, these calls. There must be filtering. There must be control on the Internet. We've got to control what people know. We've got to control what they believe, or they'll break into freedom, and we can't let that happen.
Now, I have an observation, which is that what this guy did was horrific, hideously immoral, and inexcusable. But the bigger question that the dailymail.co.uk did not want to answer, why did this man become so radicalized to the point he felt he had no other possible response to his anger but the slaughter of innocents who had done him utterly no wrong? I think we have to take a good, darned hard look at U.S. and UK foreign policy.
Yeah, these people do not like us. It's got nothing to do with religion. It has everything to do with the fact that, their relatives back home are being bombed and drone struck by the United States of America. Were you listening when I hit that one article that is now saying that Khalid Massoud, his terror attack was triggered by the racism he experienced at the hands of white people? So it's ultimately the Parliament attack is the fault of you white people.
No. But, I mean, those living in the countries where we are expropriating resources for the good of the U.S. and the U.K., to which we have no moral right, by the way, and making sure that these countries are ruled by Western-centric leaders who may not have the best interests of the people of their countries at heart, and making sure that these resources are only sold in U.S. dollars.
Well, our leaders have no morality, so let's take that out of the equation. The thing about trying to claim that white people are ultimately to blame for what happened at Parliament, I think is a good illustration of the guiding principle of both politicians and corporate media. No matter what happens, how can I use this to serve my agenda? And it's becoming more and more a common feature in what is being described as the post-truth society. They've actually given it a name and said, truth and facts don't matter anymore, only what we can make you believe should be important. And it is a ridiculous concept. It's mental Marxism, but they're out there saying, something happens, oh, we'll blame Russia for it, or we'll do this, or we'll do that. There's absolutely no sense in the corporate media or government that they might be factual or accurate or truthful. It's just constant sell the propaganda, sell the propaganda, sell the propaganda.
And, I'm looking at all this going on in the world today, and the reality is that the U.S. and British government collectively cannot say with a straight face that there's no blood on their hands for all of these wars of conquest, because there are, in places like Yemen, Syria, Africa, Iraq, and Afghanistan, to get those resources it believes will further protect them as they go into more wars.
There's no blood on our hands. We're wearing gloves.
And this too.
And the gloves are made out of the skin of our young soldiers being killed and crippled.
And what these governments do is they wrap these wars in a cheap Chinese-made flag of patriotism, telling these kids that they're going off to fight, that the wars are about duty, honor, courage, and defending their way of life, when these wars are ultimately only about improving the corporate profits of those companies involved with the military complex.
Well, that is our way of life.
And expropriating foreign resources through
We're a warmongering nation. You might as well get used to it.
Conquest.
All right, we're coming up on a commercial break here.
Okay.
And we're going to take a pause for some commercials, and we'll be right back with more clarification. Welcome back to our show here. And Claire, what is next up?
Well, apparently, and this does not surprise me, Washington talks have ended without an agreement on Israeli settlements.
Ooh, I'm shocked.
Yeah, imagine my surprise.
I'm just so shocked.
And I have a word for President Trump, please. Exercises in futility will not bring credibility to your foreign policy. You're just going to have to let this go, because Israel has demonstrated that it is pathologically incapable of being a good neighbor to any of the countries surrounding it, and also refuses to state clearly what the borders are of Israel? Where are they? No one knows. You know, they're invisible in the sky.
They've never permanently declared their borders. They haven't written a constitution. Basically, Israel's government runs Israel as if it's still a Bronze Age tribal kingdom, smiting their enemies and stealing whatever it is that they want. And they do dream of Eretz Israel from the Nile to the Euphrates. And I'm afraid they're thinking both directions now.
Yeah. And if you take a look, and this article I posted has a map of so-called Eretz Israel, there are hunks of Jordan, Syria, Iraq, Lebanon, Egypt, and Saudi Arabia, which are going to have to go for Israel to accomplish this. Now, those countries are not going to let that happen without a fight.
Yes, but don't forget, the United States has promised to aid Israel in any war, even if Israel starts it.
Yeah, and so what Israel is doing right now to claim more territory closer to home, it is practicing serial genocide against the Palestinians, ramped up a brisk annexation program in East Jerusalem and the West Bank, throwing out Palestinians whose families have lived in those homes for generations.
And it's important to understand, Israel is violating its own law and international law, because international law allows an occupying power to seize land in an occupied territory for military purposes, but once the military purpose is over, the land must be returned to its former owner. Now, what Israel is doing all across the West Bank is they'll go on in and say, we need a military security buffer zone, and they'll kick out the Palestinians there.
And they never can come back.
And what they'll do is then they'll take the land and say, we're going to sell it for development of a settlement. And that's the violation of international law right there. But Israel sees itself as above the law because, after all, they're the chosen people of the imaginary playmate in the sky. And I think back, there was some years ago, there was a French politician who got in serious trouble. In fact, I think he ultimately lost his job because he was overheard saying at a function, not on TV, not on radio, but just at a diplomatic function, why the world was risking global war over this blank little country. And but there is no question Israel wields tremendous clandestine influence over the world through bribery, blackmail, probably more of that than anything else. Looking at how the U.S. subservience to Israel has really continued to become more obvious, I think Israel is blackmailing our entire government over 9/11.
Could be.
Because Israel's attitude is, do what we say, or we'll tell the world what really happened on 9/11. It'll be worse for you than for us, because people expect things like that from Israel. But for you, oh boy, are you going to be sorry?
I mean, this is the country which attempted to frame Egypt for the deliberate Israeli attack against the USS Liberty. Cheerled the disastrous U.S. military attack against Iraq because it was an alleged existential threat against Israel, and continues to advocate for a U.S.-led military strike against Iran, again, because it's an alleged existential threat to Israel. High standard of living, their kids are going to school in Iran. 60% of Iran's scientists are gals. Hello, I like that. And they are currently bombing Syria unprovoked and uninvited in order to accomplish regime change, and they've just told Putin, hey, we're going to bomb when we feel like bombing. And President Trump, I just wish he understood it's time to cut his losses and move on to something that can actually be accomplished, because, and I hate to say it, Mike, but a just and lasting peace between Israel and Palestinians will only happen after pigs have discovered how to fly.
Well, we better get the GMO labs running on that one.
Oh, amen.
All right, we're going to take another break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And Claire, what is your next story?
Well, this is very interesting to me. Apparently in Central California, Fresno, Clovis area, police destroyed a farmhouse to capture a homeless man who was armed with an ice cream bar. Oh, the horrors. And apparently the Fresno County Sheriff's Department and Clovis PD and far too many other law enforcement agencies thought this was perfectly great. This gentleman had a farmhouse, very lovely, and he had 2 law enforcement agencies and all their toys last June. And according to his lawsuit, A homeless man was rousted from a nearby vacant house after he was discovered sleeping in the closet. He left peacefully but was discovered by the construction crew, and he was breaking into Jessen's house. And a construction worker called the police because they thought they were going to help. Now, what they wound up doing, Mike, was completely ransacking this place. I mean, destroying it to the point of taking the foundations out with some of their toys.
Yes.
You know?
That is utterly ridiculous.
My goodness,
so
yeah.
Is the lawsuit in progress? Or is
the lawsuit is in progress. And this was not about to protect and serve. This was about to search and destroy with impunity. And it appeared that the local cops did this with a sure and certain knowledge that they had to create as much property damage as they felt they could and was necessary. And I mean, this man's house is absolutely, it's unlivable. You know, Jessen and his family have had to move, and I do not understand this kind of activity by the police.
I'll bet you the cops were all on prescription antidepressants. You know, and it wasn't necessary because there actually is a technology where searchers who are from more benign services have this device that can actually detect the electrical noise created by a human heartbeat from yards and yards away, through walls and everything. So if they wanted to find this homeless guy, all they got to do is go in with one of these machines, pick up the heartbeat and say, okay, he's obviously here on the other side of this wall.
Yeah, let's arrest him and, you know, case closed.
Yeah, and that would be it. But, I mean, it's overboard. And if you don't mind, I would very much like to insert one of my stories here.
Oh, sure, honey.
Because it ties in with my comment about the police.
All right.
Apparently, down in Miami, there's 14-year-old girl, Nika Venant, hung herself, committed suicide, and live-streamed her suicide on Facebook. She was on Zoloft, a very powerful antidepressant, which actually cannot legally be prescribed to children.
How the heck did she get it then?
Well, apparently there is a loophole in the law where children with certain diagnosed conditions can be given Zoloft, but even the manufacturer of Zoloft admits this drug is a problem. It does trigger suicide in younger patients.
Yeah.
And again, our medical industrial complex is no longer about your health. It's about how much money they can take out of your pocket by exploiting the fear of death and disease.
Well, a logical question to me here was, shouldn't the police department have been maybe monitoring some live streaming? Could they have possibly prevented this death?
There's way too much going on. I mean, in theory, the NSA is monitoring all of this stuff, but they apparently didn't pick up the phone and dial 911 and say this person is killing themselves. And time is against them. If it's a slow hang, you got to get to them within 5 minutes.
Yeah.
If it's a drop hang, it's over and done with at that point. But the fact that she felt like she needed to live stream it and put it on out there, and yes, she had a very troubled background. She'd been in and out of foster homes. But I think we have to look at the Zoloft as a contributing factor. Now, there was a study done down in Florida that showed police are far heavier users of these medications than the average citizen. And we know that a big problem with these prescription psychiatric medications is they interfere with your ability to control an impulse. And people who are on these medications, they'll get an impulse and they'll just go with it, even if it's self-destructive or destructive to others. And again, going on over to ssristories.org, one of the stories that really leapt out at me was there was this kid who tried to commit suicide.
Yeah.
And they got to him in time.
Yeah.
There was an intervention. And when it was all over, they said, why did you do it? And he said, I don't know. It just popped into my head, and I couldn't help myself. And yes, he was on these prescription antidepressants.
Yeah, and if, you know, the damage these people in California did, I do have to
To the house,
to the house. I have to wonder if they were also on some kind of very heavy antipsychotic drugs.
And the other problem is, of course, that the police department leadership and the local governments always side with the police.
Yeah.
Like when down in Georgia, they threw a flashbang grenade into a crib and permanently scarred the baby.
Yeah.
There was another story I saw the other day where police did another one of these cases where they went to the wrong address and they broke on in. and they shot the homeowner. They killed the guy who didn't realize it was the police because they were all dressed in black that he can't see. He's defending his home. And the police shot and killed this guy, and the police police chief is saying, well, this is reasonable. I mean, yes, the cops made a mistake, but, you know, they were fired on. They have every right to defend themselves. And apparently the right to defend your home against a clearly illegal intrusion by the police, it does not exist. Or apparently they have the attitude now that wherever the police go, they have a right to be there. Even if they've got the wrong address, even if they don't have a warrant. And that right there is a police state.
I'd like to bop on over to an accusation, and this is an hysterically funny story to me. The FBI has allegedly uncovered evidence of treason among alt-right websites, says George W. Bush, ethics lawyer. That's hysterical to me. The guy's name is Richard Painter, and he tweeted a link to an article suggesting that the Bureau was looking into news outlets like Breitbart, InfoWars, and the Kremlin-backed RT and Sputnik News to see whether they worked with Russian-backed operatives to disseminate stories favoring Donald Trump during the presidential election. And I got to tell you, Mike.
I'm crushed we didn't make the list.
No, darn it.
I'm crushed we didn't make that list.
I know, honey. I share your pain, believe me.
Let's go on back to the actual definition of treason. Treason is defined as giving aid and comfort to the enemy in time of war. Now, a good example of that would be the war on terror, when you were being told that ISIS was your enemy in that war on terror, and then we find out that Hillary Clinton as Secretary of State and Barack Obama as President were covertly supplying ISIS with weapons in Syria. Sorry about that. But, you know, we are, at least for the moment, there's no declaration of war against Russia. And so even if they were able to confirm that somebody in Russia was financially supporting us, which if they are, the checks got lost in the mail again. Gosh darn that postal service. It's not an act of treason. We're not giving aid and comfort because Russia is not officially, legally our enemy yet.
And something I want to point out to our readers and our listeners. I have linked to all the resources indicated above when I've been able to vet that the information came from multiple sources and believed, to the best of my knowledge, that the information presented was factually based. But when it becomes alleged treason to tell the truth the best you can on a blog, you know your government has gone full tilt, boogie, Orwell on you.
Well, they're not going Orwell, they're going McCarthy.
That too.
What they're doing, they're going to replay the McCarthy Red Scare. And the attitude is that if you are not 100% on board with the U.S. government's propaganda and agenda, then by default you are a Russian stooge. And it's a return to Code Napoleon. You're declared to be guilty. The burden of proof is on you to prove that you're innocent. And again, during the real McCarthy witch hunts, anybody who stood up to McCarthy and said, you're wrong to be doing this, McCarthy would say, well, you're obviously, you know, you're a commie stooge. I have a list of names, and you're on it. When Edward R. Murrow was fighting against McCarthy and the tactics that were being used to destroy the lives of innocent people, they were accusing not just Edward R. Murrow, but all of CBS of being in league with the communists. And there's a wonderful movie about that, Good Night and Good Luck.
Oh, great movie if you haven't seen it.
It is. Another movie, and this one's a few years back, it's called The Majestic, with Jim Carrey. And the storyline there is he's a writer in Hollywood, he's accused of being a commie, his life is destroyed, he suffers an accident, winds up in this little tiny town, and then he gets his memory back, and he goes back to have to deal with the Congress and the hearings about what's been going on. It has a very happy ending, and I identify with this movie very strongly because of our own blacklisting. And also because I grew up in a very small town, much like the fictional Lawrence in the movie, and so I had a resonance with that as well. But that's what we're being led into, where the accusation is equal to condemnation. Yeah. You know, if you're not with us, then you're a Russian stooge, and because you are by default a Russian stooge, we're going to take action against you. And it could get very ugly and very dangerous out there, where people are going to be arrested and thrown in prison on the basis of myth, rumor, and hearsay.
Yeah. And what strikes me is so hysterically hypocritical. George Bush had an ethics lawyer in his lying about the reasons the U.S. government had to go to war in Afghanistan and Iraq. I mean, come on.
Not to mention 9/11.
Yeah. But Richard Painter cannot expect to be taken seriously by any thinking American on these charges after the dark and so brutal legacy of Bush's presidency.
Well, you know, it looks good to have an ethics lawyer, even if you're not paying attention to them.
Yeah,
and again, they're trying to put out a trial balloon to see if the American people are going to go along with the return to McCarthyism. And I don't think this is going to get any more traction than the idea that Trump and Russia were working together. Or that Russia interfered with our election, especially with the FBI admitting there's no evidence for either one of those, and the revelation that the United States has never hesitated to tamper with the elections in other countries. 81 since the end of World War II.
Yeah, yeah. And it looks to me like this guy is really desperately trying to underpin the U.S. deep state narrative of Russia being the bad guy in the geopolitical arena and a country that the U.S. government and military needs to wage war against. And Mike, I have to wonder just how much of Painter's stock portfolio is invested in companies which comprise the U.S. military-industrial complex to even begin to make these accusations.
Oh, they're all motivated by self-interest. All of these war hawks own huge amounts of stock in the weapons makers, and it is a form of corruption that Eisenhower did warn us about. When he warned us about the military-industrial complex, Eisenhower popularized that term. This idea that there is so much money spent on defense that it's become a power, almost a government to itself.
Yeah.
And, of course, I would hope that the American people know enough history that is not taught in the school, but they've acquired it outside, to recognize the attempt to return to at least a Cold War, if not a hot war, and a return to McCarthyism, because those are all dark stains on the history of our nation.
Yes, definitely. An article that is a little bit more optimistic, again coming from Blacklisted News. The deep state's dominant narratives and authority are crumbling. And people are taking more of an interest in this concept of the deep state. And now the progressives have prostituted themselves to the security agencies and the neocons and neoliberals. They're busy denying that such a thing as the deep state exists.
Well, whether you call it the establishment or the deep state or just a bunch of really corrupt people taking care of themselves, call them the clique, call the Klan, whatever. The name almost doesn't really matter.
No.
But what is significant is that in the age of the Internet, people are able to go on out and search for the information themselves, and apparently, according to the numbers coming out of the search engines, people are really starting to dig out this information for themselves. And that certainly explains why our readership is continuing to climb, even as the corporate media viewership and readership continues to drop into the Al-Qaeda.
No, our readership is growing.
Our readership, that's
okay.
If I said that, I misspoke it. No, our readership is growing. Our numbers are going up. I mean, the corporate media has been reduced to cheating to create the illusion it's still relevant. We had that story a couple of weeks ago. The corporate media are using Chinese botnets to load clicks onto their websites to make it look like they still have a lot of people paying attention to them, which, of course, is defrauding their investors at the same time.
And for me, it's very simple. After Bush's j'accuse against Saddam Hussein that he had weapons of mass destruction, which he never did, to sell the invasion and occupation of Iraq, no one can take anything the federal government or any of its elements or reps, anything they say seriously. The great lies are starting to become unmasked. And U.S. citizens realize that all wars are really economic in nature, and the American citizens, at least people I talk to, have become very war-weary and very war-skeptical.
They're very, very worried. Somebody once actually emailed in and said, you're running a risk walking around wearing the shirt with Putin on it, or the Trump is my president. I said, no. everybody around here is starting to really wake up and come on board. I haven't actually met anybody defending the Democrats or Hillary or Obama in months. At this point, we certainly know that the globalist agenda is in serious trouble. You have all these pro-sovereignty candidates leading in the polls all over Europe.
Oh, yeah.
We're seeing how the globalists are rigging elections to try and cling to power. But when it becomes that obvious to the general population, it's only accelerating the fall.
That's something that Le Pen is going to have to look at very closely in her election.
Oh, well, Jean-Claude Juncker is already out there saying there's no way she'll win the election. The fix is in. We've got the Diebold machines all set to go. We hired all of Hillary's vote riggers to come on over, and we're going to screw Le Pen so bad she won't be able to sit down for a week.
Ow. Ow. But, no, it's an issue. Well, are these the same people who said Donald Trump would never be elected also?
Could very well be.
Yeah.
And these are interesting times. They're very dark times. They're very dangerous times. But all we can do, we're past the point of no return. We all have to just keep doing what we're doing as hard as we can, trying to get back to a world of peace and prosperity. We're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be back with the last segment of our program after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. Last segment of our program today, and don't call because we've got the phone lines closed for our clarification segment here.
Thank you.
You had one more story you wanted to share with us.
Yeah, I did, and it's an observation, and I think it's pretty valid, of the degree to which the surveillance state is going after Donald Trump. And there's a gal who was former special FBI agent, Colleen Rowley, and she has been expressing that she's extremely concerned about how Democratic hawks, neocons, and other associates of the deep state have obsessed over what she calls the resurrection of the ghost of Joseph McCarthy, and have built political support for a permanent war policy around hatred of Russia. Rowley, whose 2002 memo to the FBI director exposed some of the FBI's pre-9/11 failures, compares the current anti-Russian hysteria to the Red Scare, fear of communism, which was, of course, famously associated with J. Edgar Hoover, who collaborated with Senator Joe McCarthy's hunt for allegedly disloyal Americans in the late 40s and early 50s. And, Mike, my thought is this. This hatchet job on both Trump and Russia has got to end so that this country can get the real and pressing problems it faces sorted, like illegal immigration, the crumbling of America's infrastructure, and a military which spends huge, vast sums of money for equipment and services it buys, but at the end of the day doesn't get very much bang for its buck.
All right, a couple of fundamental points. First of all, any government in history that is facing a crisis of confidence in its population, it will create an enemy to scare them back into obedience and dependency, psychological dependency.
20 minutes of hate.
2 minutes
2
of hate.
minutes of hate, sorry.
Well, with inflation, it's 20 minutes.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. Back when it was J. Edgar Hoover and everybody against the Soviet Union, there was a lot of support for that because American capitalists and corporations feared the possibility of a socialist revolution in this country which would end their profitability. But Russia today is not communist.
No.
They are in many ways just as capitalistic as the United States used to be before the United States descended into fascism. And so that broad-based support from business leaders is not going to be there. The second problem they're dealing with, of course, is that for people who are my age, and if you are, I feel sorry for you, we remember that first Cold War. We remember the Red Scare mongering and the very obvious propaganda. And we're not going to be fooled by it a second time. And we're almost at the end of the show here, so I'm going to issue a challenge to the elderly Rivero's Rangers. We'll call them the Gray Raiders. Okay. Take a moment, make a point of spending time with the younger generation and say, we've been down this road before. And it really did not work out very well for the American people. Innocent people were hurt, their lives destroyed, and it was all just to make the military-industrial complex richer. And a lot of people died on that. We need to teach our children the history the schools don't want them to know, because that way they will learn how to spot when the government tries to take us down the mistakes of the past yet again.
And a magician would call this McCarthy-esque witch hunt against Trump and Russia misdirection, right? To a degree?
No, they're not misdirecting. They're trying to just demonize to the point where we automatically say, ooh, Russia's bad, we're good, we must go to war. Okay. There's the music. It's time for Claire and I to get out of here. And we'll be back Monday here on the Republic Broadcasting Network. Until then, have a good weekend. Please make a point of sharing what you learn here with everybody that you know. Please, especially the thing about older Americans, talk to the younger generation and tell them, we have seen this all before. Let us not repeat that mistake. We'll be back Monday. Aloha, America.